Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So I haven't given out an updated mock draft since after the draft lottery, like the day after when we found out that Macklin Celebrini was going to be a San Jose Shark. So I thought, considering the draft's in 3 weeks, I'm obviously going to post a mock draft like a couple days before that. I would give an updated one because in the recent weeks, and especially in the recent days with the draft combine, we have found some things out. There's been some news that is reported that has affected my mock draft compared to when I did it 3 to 4 weeks ago. You look at it, a guy like Beckett Seneca has shot up the rankings. Levshunov is talking to Chicago, according to him. There's a ton of mutual interest. He's the now odds-on favorite to go second overall. So it's time to update our mock draft. We're going to go from first overall all the way to 32nd overall. And without further ado, actually, before we get into that, this is what I think the teams are going to do. Again, this is not my personal ranking. If you follow me on Instagram, follow me on TikTok. First off, go follow me there. You're going to see that I'm rolling out my personal rankings. This is what I think the teams are going to do based on positional need, based on drafting habits. Do they go like Europe a lot? Do they draft North Americans? Overall, all that stuff. Without further ado, let's do first overall because it's a no-brainer. Macklin Celebrini is going to go first overall to the San Jose Sharks. He has been the first overall consensus selection since the start of the season, since Cole Arsman, who we're going to get to, kind of fell off. But for good reason. He has legit top 10 player in the entire NHL potential, while also having an extremely high floor, considering this guy just does everything at a pretty high level. He has no identifiable, at least in terms of me watching him, flaws. There's stuff that he can obviously improve, but he is just a fantastic prospect, one of the best prospects of the last decade. Not a Bedard, not a McDavid, but he is fantastic, and I think he is going to be a future first-line superstar center. Him and Will Smith, lock it in my career. Do not overthink this. Just get Macklin Celebrini and call it a goddamn draft, although you got to pick at 14 overall as well. Next up, I am going to go with Artem Levshunov at second overall. When looking at this, yes, Levshunov said in recent days at the Combine, he's talked to them a lot, and it makes sense. He plays at Michigan State. Chicago's not too far away. They probably have watched him a shit ton of times. Chicago goes with their franchise defenseman here. Yes, they took Korchinski 7th overall in 2022, but when looking at Chicago, they have a lot of, on top of Bedard, obviously, but they have a lot of smaller forwards for the most part that they've drafted in recent years. So maybe that's why they're more so leaning with an Artem Levshunov than an Ivan Demidov. I understand that logic. I would go with Demidov. I think his ceiling is just far higher than an Artem Levshunov, but Levshunov at 6'2", 215 pounds, the season that he did have at Michigan State, 35 points in 38 games. I think that he's going to be a very, very good top pair defenseman and maybe a low-end legit number one defenseman down the line. So Chicago locks it up. I understand it. I personally would not go to that direction, but as long as they don't go like someone completely off the board, I think it's perfectly fine. Next up, at third overall, Demidov's on the board. I have had Demidov going second, like, all season for the most part. So at third overall, I have Cayden Lindstrom. I don't have Ivan Demidov. I think when looking at Pat Verbeek's history in terms of drafting with the Anaheim Ducks, he does like these bigger forwards compared to some of these smaller skill guys. So I do have him taking Cayden Lindstrom, who obviously tore it up this year at the Medicine Hat Tigers. Didn't play a ton, but had 27 goals, 19 assists, 46 points in just 32 games. He has fantastic potential. If this guy pans out, he is going to be an amazing, I don't know if he's going to be their number one center because I think Carlson's a better prospect, but he could be a legit fantastic power forward, first line center, point per game, very good shot. So I think that eventually they are probably going to transition him over to the wing to play with a Leo Carlson or a Mason McTavish. But yeah, I think Anaheim goes with Cayden Lindstrom, the North American prospect, a little bit more less risk in terms of getting him over. Well, he's obviously over already, but there's less risk involved. And I think Pat Verbeek likes his big physical guys, and Cayden Lindstrom ticks that box off more than, say, an Ivan Demidov that's a smaller skilled guy. At fourth overall, I do have Ivan Demidov here going to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now, this is, I don't know if they will pick him here. I'm projecting that if he falls that much, he is head and shoulders above whoever I would have at fifth in this mock draft. I can understand Cayden Lindstrom given his ceiling over Demidov, but I think at fourth overall, the Columbus Blue Jackets would be foolish to not take an Ivan Demidov. They don't really need a defenseman that much, considering they have Werenski, they have Jiricek, they have Matejchuk. They're fine defenseman-wise. They need an elite winger to play with Adam Fantilli, and Demidov is that elite winger. 60 points this year, 30 games in the MHL. Didn't get any run at the KHL level, but he dominated against guys that were older because it's U20, guys that are older than him in his age. Fantastic season, set records in the MHL this season. I think he has legit 90 to 100 point potential. I think he probably has the second highest potential in this entire draft just because he's such a skilled playmaker. When looking at it, I think he's already a better playmaker than a Macklin Celebrini. Celebrini does everything else better, but in terms of creating with the puck, Demidov is just special, in my opinion, and I think Columbus should sprint to the microphone if they hear Anaheim take Cayden Lindstrom in this scenario. At 5th overall, I had him going here last time in my last mock draft, but I have Tij Iginla going to the Montreal Canadiens. Now, when looking at Tij Iginla coming into the season, he was viewed as like a late first-round pick, didn't have that much production in the WHL, as more so of his dad. This year, balls out. 47 goals, 37 assists, 84 points for the Kelowna Rockets. And yeah, only 6 foot. He's not that big of a dude, but he plays like he's 6'2", 6'3". He has a fantastic shot. He's able to drive offense on top of the fact that he is basically a power forward. He's not afraid to get into the nitty-gritty. Reminds me a little bit of Ryan Leonard from last year. Not the tallest guy, but will get physical with you. I think this would be a good pick for the Montreal Canadiens. Obviously, ideally, Demidov or Lindstrom would fall to them at 5th overall. I think they would take him, though, either of those guys over Tij Iginla. Jesus, they would take him over Iginla, but if at 5th overall, those two are gone, I think Iginla makes a lot of sense for the Montreal Canadiens. At 6th, we're going to have some defensemen here. I have the Utah Hockey Club selecting Zane Parekh. When looking at Parekh, 96 points in 66 games. Best of like the 21st century in terms of production for the OHL. I think Utah is aggressive with this pick. They pick a guy that I think out of the defensemen might have the highest ceiling in terms of if he hits, he is going to be an absolute offensive dynamo. Not Cale Makar 2.0, but I see some shades of that. I think he can be a point per game, 20 goals, 60 assist guy if he fully works out. And when looking at Utah, I think they probably do go defense considering they have a fantastic young forward core. Yes, they do have guys like Simashev coming up in the system, but they definitely need a defenseman. Then at number 7, Ottawa Senators fans, you might want to turn away, but I have them selecting Carter Yakimchuk. I think this would be a pretty big reach, but I think when you look at Ottawa's needs, right side defense, that is something they are going to be targeting, and I think they do like the physical nature of a Carter Yakimchuk, the fact that he's 6'3". He did have very impressive production in the WHL. 30 goals, 41 assists, 71 points in 66 games as that right-handed defenseman. So yeah, I think Yakimchuk does make sense for the Ottawa Senators. I don't love it. I don't love Yakimchuk. I think he's like a distant 6 out of the top 6 potential defensemen, but I have him going to Ottawa in this situation. Now at 8th overall, I have the Kraken taking Sam Dickinson. Dickinson, I think, is a better prospect than Carter Yakimchuk. He has a very high floor. He probably has, out of the defensemen, the second highest floor outside of Artem Levshunov. Maybe not the ceiling of a Parekh or a guy that I'm going to get to later, or two guys that I'm going to get to later, but Sam Dickinson is about as reliable as it comes. This year on the London Knights, just fantastic. London Knights were an utter wagon. Sam Dickinson was really their lockdown defenseman. Oliver Bonk, maybe it's more so their offensive defenseman, but Sam Dickinson, 6'2", 6'3", fantastic skater, played very well in the Memorial Cup, had a couple clutch goals. When looking at him, I think Sam Dickinson would be a very good add to the Seattle Kraken's prospect pool, considering they kind of lack an elite prospect. They have a lot of forwards. I think this would be a slam dunk pick for the Seattle Kraken. At 9th overall, I have Zeev Boyum going to the Calgary Flames. When looking at Zeev Boyum this year, amazing production, 50 points in 39 games at the NCAA level, won the national championship, so dynamic in terms of his skating at the blue line, a smaller guy, but just fantastic offensively, and I think Calgary needs these high potential guys that can really hit. Zeev Boyum maybe never going to be a legit number 1 defenseman, but I think he can eventually be a top pair offensive defenseman, power play quarterback, 55 to 60 points. I think that's well within his range. And when looking at Calgary, they just get a guy like Hunter Brustevich, but Boyum is a much, much better prospect. That should not affect them. I still think that they are a team that would probably go more so defense than, say, a forward, especially at 9th overall when a lot of the elite names are already off the board. 10th overall, when looking at 10th overall, we are actually going to have a trade to announce. This is the New Jersey Devils pick. I'm adding in a trade. I'm having some fun. UC Saros, you are a New Jersey Devil. We're trading you for the 10th overall pick. So now the Nashville Predators are on the board, and I'm going to have them take Anton Silyev from the KHL. 6'7". Everybody's calling him the next Zdeno Chara. I don't love those comparisons. Zdeno Chara is one of the best defensemen of all time, but I see the vision, and I think a guy like Barry Trotz is pretty aggressive, likes his high upside guys. Last year took Matthew Wood, another big-ass dude that has a shit ton of potential. So when looking at Anton Silyev, the Predators, when trading Saros, they kind of admit that they're going through this heavy retool rebuild, so they can wait a while for an Anton Silyev to develop, maybe unlike some of these other teams that want to win now. So I think this would be a very interesting trade for the Predators to pull off and then get a long-term project that has a shit ton of upside. I would like this for the Nashville Predators. Even though I'm not that high on Silyev, I think it would be a good fit with Nashville. At 11th overall, the Buffalo Sabres Beckett Seneca going here. Late riser, especially of late, really went from like late first round to middle, maybe even top 10. When looking at him, solid production this year for the Oshawa Generals, 27 goals, 41 assists, 68 points in 66 games. Had a really good OHL playoffs, helped lead Oshawa to the OHL finals where they ran into the London Knights, who were just goddamn wagon. And when looking at him, what scouts are really falling in love with is the fact that he grew from 5'10" last year to now he's 6'2". So he's still adjusting to his new body in terms of growing that much. So there's a shit ton of potential with this guy. He's a very good skater. And I think for the Sabres, they don't really have any needs. So I think they just take kind of a high upside guy. They have most of their talent's already at the NHL level, so I think you go with more so an upside guy than say like a Constant Helenius, who is a more so high floor guy. I think you kind of swing for the fences if you're Buffalo, because hopefully this is the last time that you're picking this high, if that makes sense. You never want to be picking top 11 for the next decade for the most part, or else something went pretty goddamn bad. At 12th overall, I have the Flyers selecting Berkly Cayden. Berkly Cayden, one of the most productive players in the entire CHL, regardless of age. 52 goals, 64 assists, 116 points. The stat behind him is only Crosby, Bedard, and Kane have put up at least 50 goals and over 115 points in their CHL draft year. That's pretty impressive. Now, when looking at Berkly Cayden, is he going to be a center at the next level? That's the number one concern with him. He's only 5'11", only 165 pounds, not a physical guy by any stretch. I'm going to bet on his skating and his overall skill. I think he's going to make it at some level. He's going to become a top 6 forward for me. I'm still pretty high on him. Maybe not that franchise number 1 center, but if you're the Philadelphia Flyers and you're picking a 12th year, you're not really expecting a franchise center. I think Berkly Cayden, with his skill and speed, is a pretty high floor guy. And if he really hits, he's really, really going to hit, in my opinion. So I like the potential matching of Matvei Michkov and Berkly Cayden down the line. At 13th, Cole Yzerman to the Minnesota Wild. I think this would be very interesting. Minnesota, most of their core pieces are on the roster, and they do have a very good prospect pool. So similarly to a Buffalo, they're expecting to be a competitive team, especially with the Suter and Parise money coming up next summer. So why not go after a guy like a Cole Yzerman that has a fantastic shot? If he really hits down the line, plays with a Kaprizov, a Matt Boldy, a Joel Eriksson-Ek, what does Minnesota really miss right now? They're a solid defensive team, but they need some elite goal scorers outside of Kaprizov and Boldy for the most part. Actually, Joel Eriksson-Ek kind of ripped it this year, but when looking at it, they need some more offensive creation, and I think Cole Yzerman pairing Cole Yzerman with some of their playmakers could be fantastic for the Minnesota Wild. And similarly, if Cole Yzerman really hits, you could be talking about a future 40-goal scorer. 14th overall, San Jose Sharks, Jiricek. Looking at Adam Jiricek to the San Jose Sharks, a very high upside kind of guy, 6'2", didn't really play a lot this year due to injury. Brother of David Jiricek. I think San Jose is going to opt defense. And I think after those top 6 guys, Jiricek probably is the next guy up. So I think San Jose, although I think they're probably targeting Logan Hensler next year in the draft. If they don't get first overall, if they don't somehow get James Higgins, which would be freaking insane, I think they're going to look at a Logan Hensler to be their number 1. But I think Adam Jiricek down the line could be a very, very good top 4 defenseman. 15th overall, I have had him mocked in like every single draft here. But to Detroit, I have Michael Brandsegg-Nygaard. He just is the ideal Detroit player, a physical guy, can get in there. He's going to be in their middle 6 down the line, I think. Played in Sweden. Shit ton of their prospects are either Swedish or played in the SHL, second-tier SHL, or the SHL Junior 20 League. Nygaard this year, 18 points, 41 games, and 10 points in 12 playoff games. Rounding out the lottery, the St. Louis Blues select one of my favorite prospects, Constant Helenius. I don't think that he should fall this far in the draft. I think this would be a steal for the St. Louis Blues. Everybody is describing him as a high floor, low ceiling kind of prospect, and I understand that. I've said it before. He doesn't really do anything at that elite of a level, but I think he just does everything so high, and considering he's such a high intelligence player, I think he probably should be a top 12 pick. But I think for the St. Louis Blues here, yeah, they could go in a myriad of directions. I think at this point, there's no real elite defenseman. I would maybe lean defenseman. If they were in the top 12, I would go defenseman, but all the top guys and even Jiricek are gone at this point. So I think Constant Helenius, who I personally think can become a low-end number 1 center down the line, or a fantastic number 2 center. About him and behind Robert Thomas. Robert Thomas's amazing playmaking, behind Helenius's decent offense and great defense, would be very interesting for the St. Louis Blues. Now we're outside of the lottery. At 17th overall, I have the Washington Capitals selecting Trevor Conley. When looking at Conley, one of the best, most explosive playmakers in this entire draft. Now, beyond that, His game has a lot of developing to do, and there's some off-ice stuff. You can look that up on your own. So there is a risk to Trevor Conley, but in terms of an overall like offensive playmaker, you can make an argument that he's top 10 in this entire draft. So I think the Washington Capitals take a risk on Trevor Conley. 78 points, 31 goals this year in 52 USHL games. He was very productive. So I have Conley going to the Washington Capitals. At 18th, I have Igor Chernyshov going to the Chicago Blackhawks. We talked about it before. Chicago previously has gone kind of small and skilled. Chernyshov is still skilled, but he's also 6'3". So I think this is a guy that one day maybe could play with the Connor Bedard down the line, being his first line left winger. Physical guy, 6'2", or 6'3", and he's very skilled. He had 28 points in 22 MHL games, got some run at the KHL level, was only playing like 5 or 6 minutes a night, so there wasn't a ton of production. Igor Chernyshov to Chicago at 18th overall. 19th, Liam Greentree to the Vegas Golden Knights. This guy was a beast in the OHL this year on a pretty shit team. 36 goals, 54 assists for 90 points in 64 games. 6'3", very physically intimidating. Not the best skater, but I think for the Vegas Golden Knights, they're not really known for their high explosive skating. They're known for being big-ass dudes that get up in your face. So I think Greentree is a pretty good fit for Vegas if they end up keeping this pick, which they probably will, actually. It's at the Sphere. What am I talking about? They're going to keep this pick. They're going to select Liam Greentree. Lock it in. Next up, New York Islanders. Sasha Boiver. When looking at Sasha Boiver, 6'2", 36 goals, 32 assists, 68 points this year in the USHL. I think that he's a very interesting prospect. If he really pans out, develops his skating, this guy can get you 30 goals at the NHL level. I think for the New York Islanders, get some more overall skill and goal scoring. I think Sasha Boiver would be a very solid pick for them. The LA Kings at 21st overall, they go with Michael Hage. Again, a very skilled and quick guy, similarly to a Trevor Conley. 33 goals, 42 assists, 75 points in 54 USHL games. I think after watching them get caved in against the Edmonton Oilers, the LA Kings are going to go with the high upside offensive guy, and Michael Hage is that. This year with the Chicago Steel of the USHL was a very productive player in terms of overall offensive talent. He's probably top 15, maybe even top 12 in this entire draft. The 22nd overall, the Nashville Predators, second selection, I have them taking Tarik Parasak. They kind of take maybe the long-term project at 10th overall with Anton Silyev. I think they get Parasak's weird because he did not produce at all last year in the goddamn WHL. He had 0 points in 4 games. But this year he was absolutely fantastic. And I think that he has the makings of being a solid middle six scorer based on what we saw with him producing at the Prince George Cougars. He had a good team around him, but he was fantastic as well in his own right. So Nashville gets Tarik Parasak at 22nd overall. 23rd overall, the Toronto Maple Leafs. They select E.J. Emery. Now, when talking about a Brad Treliving kind of guy, E.J. Emery is the definition of that. 6'3", already a pretty big dude, like 195, 200 pounds, and only going to get bigger from there. Probably going to fill out like 215, 220. He is a defensive defenseman that really impressed scouts at the U18 World Championship. So I think E.J. Emery is that future second pair physical presence force for the Toronto Maple Leafs. TJ Brody ain't going to be on the team anymore. Get a guy like EJ Emery in their system. And I think they go defense, considering their only real prospects of note right now are Easton Cowan and Fraser Midden. So go defense, lock up I believe he's a right-handed defenseman, lock up that right side with an EJ Emery. 24th overall, Alphonse Frey. I think I'm pronouncing that right, but Alphonse Frey from Sweden to Colorado. I think Colorado is going to pick defense with this pick, even though they do have Guliev from last year's draft, but they also got Callum Ritchie in the first round. So when looking at Frey, very, very good skater. He is one of the best skaters in this entire draft in Sweden this year. 33 points in 41 games in the SHL Junior 20 League. I think that he's a very underrated prospect in this draft. I think Colorado gets ahead of it. Again, guys like Manson, Jack Johnson, even Devon Tays are starting to get up there in age. So I think they get a young defenseman to add to their prospect pool, as well as Mikhail Guliev. 25th overall, Ottawa Senators, Nikita Artemanov. When looking at it, this guy got serious KHL run this year, 54 games, 23 points. Very, very impressive. Only 5'11", not the most physically imposing guy like, say, Igor Chernyshov. But I think Artemanov, when you put up that much production at the goddamn KHL, I think that's going to translate over to North America. And when looking at Ottawa, with this pick, just get a guy that can eventually be a factor in your middle six. And I think Nikita Artemanov is definitely that. 26th overall, Teddy Stiga to the Montreal Canadiens. Similar line of thought here. I don't think they're going to like swing for the fences. Most of Montreal's core is kind of set, locked into stone, especially after taking Iginla. I think Stiga can eventually be a very, very good middle six offensive dynamic guy. Was very impressive this year with the U.S. developmental program. Solid pick from Montreal. At 27th overall, he went here last mock draft. I have Jet Luchenko heading to Carolina. Again, this was his description, or he won from the OHL coaches poll that he was voted as top 3 smartest, hardest working players from the OHL Western Conference. That seems like a Carolina hockey player, in my opinion. Hardworking, very intelligent. That's a Rod Brindamore player. So I think Carolina goes with Luchenko here at 27th overall. 28th, Andrew Basha to the Calgary Flames. Andrew Basha, just a very solid future middle six forward, as I talked about before with those other guys. Not too impressive. I don't think he has the highest upside, but he has a pretty high floor. So Calgary, after getting Zeev Boyum with the 9th overall pick, they go forward here. At 29th overall, Leo Salin Wallenius, one of my favorite prospects, similarly to Frey. They actually played with each other in the same SHL Junior League team. When looking at Leo Salin Wallenius, fantastic skater, was point per game. He had even better offensive production than Frey. I think those two guys are very underrated. Wouldn't surprise me if they turn out to be very, very good defensemen. And when looking at the Dallas Stars, Ryan Suter is going to be gone. Esa Lindell's getting up there in age. Nils Lundqvist is kind of busted for them. Yes, they do have Liam Bichelle coming up, but he's one of those bigger guys, so I think they need a fantastic skater to eventually be on that second pair. Leo Salin Wallenius definitely fits that mold. 30th overall. We'll get in towards the end. I've been sick the last couple of days. I don't know if you can tell I'm cutting a lot more and my voice is kind of hoarse, but let's keep on going. 30th, Cole Hudson to the New York Rangers. Cole Hudson to the Rangers. I think the Rangers are going to be keeping this pick considering the sphere is owned by James Dolan. And we're looking at Cole Hudson. He's not Lane Hudson. Don't try to equate the two. They don't even play like that similar to each other. But I think Cole Hudson this year, very impressive for the U.S. National Team Development Program. And when looking at the Rangers defense core, there's a lot of question marks going forward with it. Are they even going to retain a Ryan Lindgren? So I think they replenish after going Ottman, Perreault, then Lafreniere, Kakko. Like they've been using most of their high picks on forwards over the last couple of years. So I think a guy like Cole Hudson is a decently high upside guy that one day could be a good offensive defenseman for the New York Rangers. 31st overall, Henry Muse to the Anaheim Ducks. When looking at Henry Muse, this is a guy that was expected to go like top 15, top 10 before the season. He still had a pretty productive year. Looks to be a future solid two-way second pair defenseman. And for Anaheim, again, after getting a guy like Lindstrom at 3rd overall, where you kind of bet on a guy's potential, here you kind of get not a more reliable. Again, he's going 31st overall. You're not shooing him in, but Henry Muse should hopefully eventually become either a very, very good third pair guy or maybe even a low-end second pair guy. He has a pretty decent floor for Anaheim. And then lastly, the Philadelphia Flyers from the Florida Panthers pick. Actually, I should have switched it because I have Edmonton winning the Stanley Cup. But regardless, I have them swinging for the fences. I have them taking Dean Latorno, the 6'8" guy that has 61 goals, 66 assists, 127 points this year at the U18 prep level. I think that the Flyers still have time to take massive risks, and Berkeley Cannon isn't even that much of a risk at 12th overall. So I think Danny Briere swings for the fences. Why not go for a guy like Dean Latorno? He can eventually be a fantastic Tage Thompson 2.0. Why not? Let's have some fun. Now, in looking at this, let's review it. Here it is. Here's the first 1 through 16. And then we got 17 through 32. And yeah, let me know in the comments, what do you think? Less than 3 weeks until the draft. Next Friday. So 3 weeks from now, I'll be watching the second round at the goddamn Spear. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? Which prospects am I absolutely out of my mind on? And I'll be seeing the next one.